We're good? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Innovation Subcommittee. Do we have any cards from the public? Okay. Then we will go to minutes of the meeting. Anyone have any amendments, changes, or a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Consent items 2 through 4. Does anyone need any more information or want to consider them individually? Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Information items only are 5 through 7. Does anyone need any further information or have comments? Okay, hearing none. We're just moving right along here.
Yeah.
We will go to item 8.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Today, we would like to discuss with you and make a recommendation concerning a potential ground lease with the Western Maricopa Education Center, District Number 402 at Phoenix Deer Valley Airport for a proposed parking lot to support their campus. I'm joined here today with Charlene Reynolds, our Assistant Aviation Director, who will do a brief presentation for you.
Alrighty. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Subcommittee. WestMec is a public school district with campuses throughout Maricopa County. WestMec provides career training programs such as information technology, medical assisting, and construction to both high school and adult students in Arizona. WestMec's Northwest Campus is located on the north side of Deer Valley Airport. Due to its growing student population, WestMec is requesting to enter into a 20-year ground lease for approximately 2 acres to construct and operate a minimum of 100 parking spaces for their employees, students, and visitors. The business terms for this ground lease is for, again, approximately 2 acres. WestMec would invest up to $600,000 to upgrade the current lot, including the relocation of a perimeter road, new fencing, new asphalt, lighting, and electrical at the site. The business terms would be 20 years for the ground lease with no options to extend. WestMec would have 24 months to construct the project, and this ground lease, if approved by the subcommittee, would be subject to FAA approval. The business terms would be, WestMec would be charged $15 per month per parking space, and also WestMec would receive rental credits by the aviation department to be applied on a dollar-per-dollar basis until the full $600,000 in construction costs are recouped by WestMec. With that, staff recommends that they request the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Innovation Subcommittee recommend to City Council for approval to enter into a ground lease with Maricopa Education Center, District Number 402, also known as WestMec, for 20 years.
Councilwoman?
Thank you. I actually got to take a tour of the school, and it's really growing. Is there a thought that they would be there for another 20 years and then maybe look for another site to rebuild the school? Because it was busy. There was lots of students going there. So, I mean, do they know in 20 years we may not renew it? And did they talk about their future? I'm just curious.
Okay, Madam Chair and to Councilwoman Stark, we do have in the audience Dr. Isom from WestMec, and I think he would be best to answer those questions about their future growth.
police coming up, I have also visited that campus, and I know how desperate they are for the
For
parking.
parking, yeah, I do too. It's a great school. You're doing
Yeah.
great stuff out there.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you, Subcommittee Chairwoman, Vice Mayor, and members of the Subcommittee. To answer your question, in 20 years, this is an important aspect for our mid and long-term plans. We are actually in the process. We currently have 4 campuses in the West Valley.
Okay.
We are building a 5th campus, which, as Vice Mayor Guardado knows, we're looking in the 5th district over there to expand our provision of career and technical education services. As the district expands, then the requirements on this site as well as others will be alleviated. So,
Okay, perfect. No, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Vice Mayor?
So I also had the chance to tour the facility, and it was just amazing, right? As someone, you know, like in Maryville, we represent 40% of our population is under the age of 19, and seeing all the great work that you guys are doing there, like seeing the students, how thrive they look. The place looks great. I mean, the students do an amazing job of keeping up the place. I mean, I could see the great benefit, you know, that it's going to be to our community in District 5, and the great advantage that they're having right now, the students that are going there now. Dr. Donovan, I think all of you guys have been doing an amazing job in terms of keeping our children motivated while they're in high school, and having them figure out what is it that they want to do once they're done with high school. If college may not be an option for them, I think that's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very incredibly supportive of this. Thank you so much for the work you guys do.
well, thank you, and thank you for the compliments. And I, in turn, wanted to compliment the City of Phoenix for our partnership to include the leadership of Director Bennett, Charlene Reynolds, as well as Chris Mackey, who I believe is sitting in the right over there, as well as your city management. It's an emerging partnership, and we look forward to continuing to work with Phoenix. The majority, we have 48 high schools that are in the Phoenix West Valley, and the majority of our students at our central programs are from the city of Phoenix. So it's a great partnership, and thank you for that support. So.
Councilwoman Pastor?
I have a question. So is the plan, as your strategic plan is to expand, is what I had heard, and so please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the intent of where right now the lease is that then students would go to the other campuses?
No, actually, the question was long-term. And I was saying that as we expand within our district boundaries, which is 3,600 square miles, it'll alleviate some of the requirements on all of the campuses to include this one. At this campus, we have approaching 500 students, but we do have capacity to offer additional programs. The parking is going to be important for us to be able to expand our existing offerings to serve the students in the area. So if the question is for the next 20 years, this is needed now and in the midterm. But as we expand, we're looking to be able to alleviate the load on all of those. So in 20 years, you know, it's hard to say where West Mech will be. We anticipate that 20 years is the limit for a lease for a public education district. If it's at a point where we look to renegotiate, then that would be discussed well in advance of the expiration of this. But we will plan, you know, accordingly, because an extension is not guaranteed. So good planning on West Mech's part would be to plan for that possibility that this parking may not be available at that point in time. Is that a fair statement?
I guess on your part, yes, it would be a fair statement. On my part, as on a city side, I would look at as an educator, knowing that that's only temporary solution, and start looking if there's going to be, because what I heard is there is going to be expansion, and in order to serve the expansion, of getting up to 500 students, you need the parking. But that's a temporary solution. And what is it for me? How do we assist in looking at what the future is? Because the intent is to look at the future as to find a long-term solution for the needs of that area. So I think what's happening is we're in the midst of transition, and this is what we need now. We don't know what the future looks like. We don't even know, well, we kind of know what the growth looks like, but there may be another school added maybe further west that would then relieve some of the parking issues.
One explanation that may help to describe how our overall planning will impact all of our campuses is that campus, students drive from all over Phoenix and the West Valley to that campus. So you may have a student that, the majority of our students are from Phoenix, but they're not necessarily from that area. They may be down in District 5 or even south of the 10 that drive up there for the career and technical education program, say in HVAC.
Okay.
So as we build other campuses closer to them, then those students, so as we grow, we kind of plan. Now for that building itself will not expand. Does that help?
Yeah. Now I understand what you're saying. I
Okay.
understand what currently happens is you have commuter students currently to go and get their education, and possibly in the future, there may be the same concept closer to them, so they will no longer be commuter students.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you very much. C.J. Williams?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I just wanted to take a moment and speak in favor of this item. I'm the campus principal of our Northeast campus and have had the privilege to tour a majority of you around our campus, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. A lot has already been said that I was going to state, and we appreciate the compliments and the thoughtful questions about our growth and our programming and what that looks like for our students. We have currently serve about 500 students at the location in about 10 different programs, career and technical education programs. This parking expansion will allow us to increase our programming by at least 4 programs to the location. We've got programming 7 a.m. to about 9:45 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we are taking full advantage of the facility as we have it now, but we've got times during the day where our parking is just at capacity. 100% of our students have to transport themselves to our campus. As a CTED, we don't have the ability to bus students to our campus. So this will definitely help us increase our offerings in Phoenix, in the West Valley, in support of skills training and workforce development. We are very, very thankful and grateful for the partnership we have with the City of Phoenix. Secondary to our primary need, which is for students, we do have space that's multi-purpose or common area space on our site that we open up to local organizations and associations. The Pilots Association has held trainings there. We've had North Phoenix Chamber hold meetings on our site. So that always presents a challenge for us when our students are currently parked, and we try to invite anywhere from 50 to 100 people onto our campus at any given time. There's nowhere to park. So, and we know along Williams Drive, it's in the security zone, the FAA security zone. So there's not parking along the street either. So we just want to thank you. I thank you for taking the time to learn about us and come and see us in person. I know it makes a difference, and we value the City of Phoenix partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Motion?
I'd like to make a motion for item 8.
Second.
Okay, we're approving staff's recommendation, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we are to number 9. which is tree program update and new donation portal.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. And Happy New Year to you all. Happy to present this afternoon. Joining me here today to discuss the trees, myself, Mark Hartman from the Assembly Office. We have Spencer Self from the Director of Neighborhood Services, Kenny Knutson, the Director of Street Transportation, Cynthia Aguilar from Deputy Director in Parks. And then also in the audience today, many other departments that we'll be talking about today, including Planning and Development, Alan Stevenson, and Jesus Sapien from Transit, and Michael Hammett from our volunteers. It has really been, and we'll hear about how we've very much been collaborating as departments across the city to bring forward our tree and shade. And as I introduce the topic of trees, I mean, this subcommittee addresses many forms of infrastructure as far as water infrastructure and street infrastructure, but the tree infrastructure in our city is equally a very important part in consideration as we go forward. Certainly as it addresses urban heat island and walkability and livability in our city, but also it's very much part of identity of our city and our residents. So it's interesting as visitors come here, they're surprised sometimes by how many trees there are and are thinking, whoa, and yet it's probably much greater than that is the passion of our residents to really recognize the value of the trees. So there are, so not only urban heat island, as I mentioned, but also their ability to clean the air and provide stormwater infrastructure. And as well increase land values, but essentially creating a real identity for our city. And so as I give a brief background on where this came from, that passion for trees actually is very much part of what formed the Tree and Shade Master Plan. A pretty ambitious goal to double our tree canopy that was adopted in 2010, and it was because of the interest in our residents and our council to really recognize the importance of doubling our tree canopy. It was led a lot in part by the Parks Department as they brought forward the Community Forest Assessment in 2014, which is a major effort to actually, they brought in Davy Tree, a contractor, to actually label all of our trees, over 90,000 trees in the city with species and height and diameter, and that's been very much a formation to form our landscaping landscaping plans for each year by species, and so it's been a very important part, and they've been adding to that Community Forest Assessment as part of our annual inventory. Then the adoption of the Walkable Urban Code is a really great example, not only of just a great policy nationally, but also in its requirement for 75% shade around new developments. That's largely met by developers using trees as a means to shade around that. It's a national best practice, and it really supports, shows a good example of how policy can support our advancement of trees. When Sustainability Group went out to the community, we had over, in our 2050 sustainability goals in 2016, we had over 8,000 resident comments as part of that plan, and the most heard comment of all of them was people are very interested in trees. As we surveyed residents, 92% commented that the goal to double the tree and shade canopy was a good idea. They definitely were, we were very surprised by how strongly the community advocated for trees at that time. We actually tested in our surveys how much they valued it, and we actually asked whether they were willing to donate to a tree campaign, and over 50% said yes. And we said we'd be willing to participate in community plantings in your neighborhood, and 65% of people said yes. So really strong interest from the community. In 2018, after comments, a lot of comments from the community, this subcommittee charged the EQSC, the Environmental Quality and Sustainability Commission, to take recommendations for trees, shade, and urban heat island, particularly focus on trees in their first mandate to really look at some recommendations for what they saw around our pathway to achieve the 2030 goals. And I'll be mentioning the recommendation later today. So I wanted to start off with our recommendations for 2019 or overview of 2019 for really what we've accomplished in this last year. It's been a landmark year. I call it our best year ever as far as coordinating our tree planting efforts. So a lot has happened throughout the city as we've kind of worked together very strategically to look at where we can plant and how we can plant the most possible trees. We've also seen increased community involvement. So from volunteers and our Citizen Forester program and AmeriCorps Vistas, all leading efforts to really see some innovative things and having the community participate in many of our plantings. As well, we heard for the community, and I think some of you heard from the community around landscape. How are we doing? How are we maintaining trees in our own servicing? And so, the street transportation has been leading an effort to really look at landscape maintenance best practices of how do we do and make sure that we're doing a consistent best practice standards for maintaining all of our landscape. And a significant effort as well over the last year was really from planning and development, evaluating text amendments, possible text amendments to zoning ordinance to protect trees. And they're going out to stakeholders and key groups this beginning first part of this year, and will bring recommendations on for amendments to the zoning ordinance to council in the late spring. And so pretty significant effort they've done as far as the zoning amendments. But here's I guess, unveiling the curtain is some good news. Over 4,500 trees planted by various departments and other partners, such as Keep Phoenix Beautiful in the other category and Trees Matter. So significant efforts, plantings in 2019. If we were to say of the 4,500 total, we typically have about 1,000 to 1,500 trees lost each year due to storms and accidents and due to age. But the tree loss was estimated at 1,200 through our storm reporting. So about 3,300 trees were added to our tree inventory, which is really the best we've seen in the last 10 years as far as number of trees planted. So a really good effort as we focus on that. It certainly is better at delivering a total number of tree plantings. And to highlight what this experience is like, we've actually brought 3 of the departments forward, and we'll lead off with Neighborhood Services. Spencer, the director there, to talk about Neighborhood Services.
You're talking about trees on public property, right?
Yes, on city property and rights of way.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. You know, trees make such an amazing impact on neighborhoods in a variety of ways, and we love to get involved wherever we can. But I have to note that while the title of this slide says Neighborhood Services, we can't take credit for all the work that we're going to be talking about here. And we'll start out by talking about the Sikh community. In 2019 marked the 550th anniversary of the birth of Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the founder of the Sikh faith. The local Sikh community hoped to mark this anniversary by planting 550 trees in his honor. The effort began with Ms. Kirat Giordano, who approached the mayor's office and was followed up by Dr. Jaswant Sachdev, who raised almost $70,000 to plant trees across the city of Phoenix. Ultimately, this partnership between the Sikh community, the mayor's office, Keep Phoenix Beautiful, the Office of Sustainability, and NSD, as well as many, many volunteers, resulted in more than 700 trees being planted in Central and South Phoenix, including the Garfield and Broadway Heritage neighborhoods, and Grant and Central Park. So a truly amazing project that was brought forth by the community, and we helped to just make it a reality. Additionally, I wanted to note a few other accomplishments in 2019. We relaunched the Citizen Forester Program to support the goals of the Tree and Shade Master Plan, a partnership between Volunteer Phoenix, the Office of Sustainability, and Parks and Recreation Department. In total, 29 volunteers were trained as citizen foresters, including how to engage other volunteers in tree planting and maintenance. Also, the Community Tree and Shade Guide was created by Love Your Block and Resilient Phoenix AmeriCorps Vista members to help guide the process for volunteers to come out and plant trees across Phoenix neighborhoods. So we're really excited about a variety of things that we were able to accomplish in 2019, and we're looking forward to what we can do in 2020. And now I'll hand it over to Keeney to talk a little bit about streets.
Thanks, Spencer. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. If you may be familiar with, in the Street Transportation Department, we recently, in the last few years, took over landscape maintenance of street landscaping and vegetation. And as part of that, we reached out to our contractor community because we don't have the staff to be able to maintain those. And so we have a number of landscape contractors who we work with and manage on a daily basis to make sure that the landscaping is kept in a good condition. But right about the same time we took over the landscape maintenance, we also saw that there was this need for trees that are lost in the right-of-way, that how do we get those back? And through the council's support back in 2018, we received a budget of nearly $400,000 that's now continuing on an annual basis with our department to be able to replace those trees that are lost due to storms or accidents or anything that happens through age or whatever reason we may lose them. And we have a dedicated horticulturist who manages this effort both with our contractors and working with the community on different projects to be able to plant these trees, both replacements and as we can do new trees as well. And we use our landscape contractors to do this planting as well. As Mark noted, we had a good year, a really great year for street transportation in 2019. In a total of nearly over 1,500 trees that were planted in the right-of-way. And I just want to break that down. 950 of those trees were done through the budget that you see up there that was council approved. And then 500 additional trees were new trees that were planted as part of our just street capital improvement program. As we do street projects, we planted another 500. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention that 100 new trees, and especially around downtown, especially the photo you see here, were contributed by our Downtown Phoenix Inc. Partners, and they did a great job of locating and trying to beautify and shade our downtown area. So that takes care of the things that we do in the right of way, but I also wanted to mention, I know Jesus is not up here, but public transit has really been engaged in a tree replanting program and placement program as well. So they have focused first and foremost on the light rail corridor. So they've done a lot of work in replanting trees that were lost in the right of way along the light rail corridor. I would also mention in other areas that they might have focused on that corridor as well and hitting those things that are lost either through age or stress or accidents or whatever may happen. The third one up there, replacing trees in pedestrian areas. One thing that, as you note, is sometimes when trees grow, the way that their trunks break open, they actually may cause ADA issues. So people who are passing on the sidewalks, they may run into those trees, or people who are in wheelchairs or have persons with disabilities may have difficulty getting around them. So they've done some work to actually replant those trees in those pedestrian areas to make sure that they are more pedestrian friendly for that. And then they've also worked on improved pruning and grooming strategies with those trees as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia and Farks. Talk a little bit about that.
Some of the challenges that we have also, and then the specific area I'm thinking of is Central Avenue. Central Avenue has trees, and throughout time, little by little, trees have been haven't been replaced. The other dynamic is that we have contractors that are trimming our trees and not trimming them correctly where they're killing them. So how are we handling that for the future?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, great question. The first part I wanted to mention was in regards to the trees that are lost, we are looking at those areas. So when we get requests or we notice out there we have areas where we need tree canopy coverage, we go and look at those areas, especially where we might have lost trees in recent years. And so we do have those projects on the book to be able to use some of that $400,000, not just things that were lost that year, but so we have the ability to, we do projects to be able to replant new trees in those locations. And that's something on that contractor maintenance, that's something that, as Mark mentioned before, we're making sure across the city that our landscape maintenance contractors have, we have standard practices for pruning and trimming our trees to make sure that we don't have that effort. I know sometimes it does become difficult when you're managing both traffic on one side and pedestrian traffic on the other side to make sure that we have safe passage for both while making sure we ensure the health of the tree. So I think there's definitely some room for improvement there, and that's something we're definitely focused on to make sure that our contractors are consistent in how they prune our trees.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. The Parks Department has an annual budget of $50,000 for tree plantings each year. We rely heavily on donations and partnerships to supplement this funding to maximize the number of trees that we plant annually. Thanks to our many partners, we were able to meet our annual goal of planting 1,500 trees for the past 3 years, which includes 2019. As of today, we have completed a shade assessment on 162 of our 186 parks. And of those assessed so far, 72% of them meet our tree and shade canopy goal. We will continue to complete the shade assessments on the remaining 24 parks and focus future tree plantings on those that don't meet our shade goal of 25% coverage. In addition to our own tree plantings, the Parks Department also provides support to many of our other partner groups and our other city departments with their tree planting efforts each year. Additionally, the Parks Department manages a website with really good information for the public that's related to our urban forest. It includes information on the city's tree and shade master plan, our citizen forester program, proper tree planting methods, and a link to the tree keeper database, which you can see here on the next slide. The online tree inventory, which Mark mentioned earlier that you see here in Tree Keeper, was initially populated by Davy Tree, an outside organization that the Parks Department contracted with to develop and complete an inventory of trees managed by the City of Phoenix. So these are trees in parks and the public right-of-way. A summary of the tree benefits, which you can see on the right-hand side there, was initially developed by ASU on commonly accepted measurements and is specific to each type of tree planted. For example, how much carbon dioxide each tree absorbs and its measured impact on property values. Any member of the public can visit this website and search for trees by address or a geographic area and view different information such as the tree species or the tree height. The Parks Department has been entering information on all the trees that we plant in city parks since 2017. The goal is for us to continue to work with the Office of Sustainability to provide additional departments with access to the database so they can also input their own tree planting information and to implement new features within the software that would allow us to color code projects just for better tracking purposes. And with that, I will pass it back to Mark.
So included in your packet today is a recommendations from the Environmental Quality and Sustainability Commission. We've included those and highlighted the recommendations here, and they're not for action today. We're simply submitting them to this subcommittee for consideration. It was a really a monumental effort over a period of a year that, many volunteers came together as part of that subcommittee and very thoroughly went through regularly. I participated in many of those meetings and observed in a significant effort. I'd really like to thank the EQSC and the subcommittee for their effort over the last year. And they at the culmination of that, they brought forward recommendations, and I've highlighted 4 of the recommendations here that they did go through in great line by line, actually supportive of the text amendments being proposed by planning and development that they're working on. And they also recommended 3 other things, which was they felt that having a commission, a subcommittee or ad hoc committee of some sort to provide oversight, they recommended that for the future. They also recommended a full-time tree and program manager position, and as well as recommended future council support, both financially and policy-wise, to accelerate our tree planting projects. They were focused on not just what we're doing currently and applauding our current effort. They were pleased to see some of the things that we were doing, but recognize the gap between where we are today and where we need to be in the future to reach our 2030 goals. So this leads us now to our very last slide, which is actually the action part of this presentation. And so we're introducing the phoenix.gov/plant-a-tree website, where residents and businesses can go in and donate electronically to the donation portal. And these donations, envision that these donations be used exclusively for tree planting. And so residents will not be able to select exactly to say, I want a tree in front of my house or along this street, but they will be able to designate to either tree planting projects in neighborhoods, like through the Love Your Block program, to donate to the trees on streets or in parks. We actually had planned at the time of launch to include schools in this, or that hopefully we added in the near future to be able, or residents be able to donate to trees to be planted in schools. But at this time, we have just these 3 areas. The departments together that are planting trees have formed an urban infrastructure team. Mentioned earlier, they've been tracking a lot of our efforts, and it's this team that will identify sort of high priority areas for tree plantings within these groups, that within these areas and parks or neighborhoods where they identify the highest pedestrian corridors or the walk shed where trees are needed most. And so that's where the donations will be exclusively dedicated towards, strictly for the cost of tree planting. So with that, we bring forward a request to this subcommittee that you would recommend that council receive and disperse donations from the public to the planting of new trees and rights of way and city-owned property made through this portal. So thank you, and I'll entertain any questions.
Does the committee have questions?
Maybe.
Councilwoman?
I know now that we do receive donations. When I was in the planning department, one of our planners passed away and we planted a tree in the park. Is that program gonna roll into this program, or are you still gonna handle that separately in parks?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Stark, we do have the existing memorial program
Yeah.
that you're referencing, and that's something that we've had preliminary discussions on, and so my understanding is that we do intend to still keep that program
great.
in addition to this.
Thank you.
Councilwoman?
I have questions on the portal. Because there was a demonstration, or I had meetings regarding the portal. I also had a lot of conversations about the portal, and one was a memorial. Could we have a area or tab where if somebody, I want to dedicate a tree or purchase a tree and dedicate it under their name. There was a lot of discussion, but I didn't have any follow-up on it as to what out of that discussion had been changed or modified regarding the whole portal. So for me, it's difficult. Well, actually, it's coming out of our subcommittee. So basically, I would like an update on this portal between now and council, formal, to see if any of the things have been modified. There were several things that we had asked for or suggested and wanted to see if we could get it done. So those are my comments on the portal. I think it's a great idea. I think it's needed, but we took, as we were talking on the tree portal, we looked up immediately different cities that had the very same concept and different ways that you could donate to the tree portal. One of the things was that I just didn't want to donate $100 and it go, I have no clue where it go. I want it to be able to donate $100 or 150, however the tree, it went from 100 and up, and be able then to know where I put my tree. And so those were the conversations. I would like a follow-up conversation to understand if anything has been changed on this. So, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
So just adding a little to what the councilwoman said, I mean, I would like to see the portal expanding into the schools. Again, in District 5 at the Cartwright School District, we have issues where we don't have enough shade for our children. Like speaking with the superintendents there and with the different school board members, we've had a lot of issues in the last couple of years with students at the schools. So if there was a way where we could use the portal to maybe make some donations to the schools, or figuring a way how do we expand that program into the schools so that we can have a lot more protection for our students, especially in the months between April and like August, September, like it's really hot, and they could definitely use that. Thank you.
I have a few questions. How do you plan to publicize this?
Madam Chair, we actually have, this is primarily laying the infrastructure to allow us to receive donations, and we haven't yet planned the launch or a major, but we do envision that having a major campaign at some point with announcement and signature event to sort of have an ongoing campaign where we can actually promote and as well look for major donors to maybe support as well through the donation portal. But we did plan for an event in the future, but we haven't planned that date yet.
I have a whole list here. How do you set a schedule and a sighting of these trees? I mean, are you doing it in connection with the new streets? Parks is easy. You don't have to worry, Cynthia. But along the streets and other places where you're doing replacements or additions, how do you plan to manage the whole city?
So certainly Kenny can answer for streets.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, with regards to anything that's donated through the portal, Obviously, there are certain windows during the year that we would plant trees, so we would obviously work through scheduling those. And I think, depending on, I assume as part of this, we're going to have a reporting arrangement where we're going to be able to report back to council or to the public about how this is done and where the donations are coming in from different, whether it be for streets or parks or for neighborhoods. And I think that's something we can definitely do. So as long as we receive the donation, we would work with our contractors to install those trees. But I think that after that would be the reporting piece that we want to make sure we have centralized to be able to make sure we're giving good feedback and communication back to the council on this
So
program.
the 397,000 ends this year, and you won't have, so that's additional.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that continues on. That's an annual budget that we have in there, and so we're going to continue to do our best to spread that, make that go even further each and every year, working with our contractors to be very good stewards of that money to make sure we're planting as many trees as possible with that, because we do. You get the text messages from me during those storm events where we hear about how many trees get knocked down during those storm events, and so there are plenty that we have to replace throughout the year. We want to make sure if we can get to the ones we've replaced, but also add new ones if we can with that.
You have the maintenance responsibility now, correct?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we have maintenance responsibility up to a certain height. Our contractors work on trees up to a certain height. Once they get above a certain height, our parks forestry folks get involved and do the trimming of that, and that happens actually citywide. So they have the equipment and the expertise for that ability to do the trees over a certain height.
Okay, so now you're back on the question. How much do we spend a year right now on maintenance of trees?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I don't have that figure with me, but we can certainly get that information. Our tree maintenance figure is combined amongst many geographic parks divisions, including the forestry section. So I can tell you that the forestry division has a budget of $2.2 million. And we are the team that manages the tree maintenance for trees 12 feet and higher. But in addition to that, there's additional budgets in other parts of the Parks Department's budget for tree maintenance.
Could you get a total? Could you get one?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, of course, we have two contractors that split our landscape maintenance across the city. Now, we don't have it broken down by what they do actually for the trees versus the other vegetation we have in the right-of-way, but we can definitely provide that information as far as how much we spend a year for our landscape maintenance. And I'm sure you're well aware as well, is we just got approval from council this year to go from maintaining our city right-of-way landscaping from 3 times a year to 4 times a year.
Right.
And so that was an increase in resources that council authorized for that, and we can definitely provide that information to you.
Do you also have to pay for the water?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do definitely pay for the water not only for our street landscaping, but also for the freeway landscaping that we maintain as well. Working with ADOT, we pay for the irrigation water for that.
Can you, pardon me, give me the amount of that you spend each year?
Absolutely.
Same for parks.
Madam Chair, just to give a quick answer to that, we actually just completed in collaboration with Parks, the Tree City USA application, and in that they actually want us to document all the areas we're spending. So we accumulated for across all departments, and it was just over $3.5 million that we spend on tree planting and maintenance every year. Combined.
And that included water?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And I know streets in my district, we've lost so many trees, and it's because we don't have irrigation system. And that's why they haven't been replanted, is it needs all new infrastructure. Is that included into your costs?
Yes, all costs related to, we looked at tree planting and adding of watering infrastructure and everything related to our tree planting efforts. We reported to Tree City USA in order to receive our ongoing recognition.
Okay. Can you send us copies of that
Oh,
report?
certainly, no, certainly.
Very good.
Send a summary of that.
So I'm going to follow up on that. In Maryville, I'm going to specifically look at an area that's represented by this 3 districts. When Maryville was built, all that area was a shaded canopy. If you go down today and you go past, starting the west side, there's no trees anywhere. And it's city right-of-way. And I'm assuming, and I'm making a big assumption, but Keeney, you could probably verify it, is that there's no irrigation now in those areas, or they've been I don't know what you call it, or tapped, or, and so if we want to replace trees in the Maryvale area, in this whole process, is the cost incorporated of also putting the irrigation, putting the total cost of the system in order to replace the tree?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Pastor, when you look at that, obviously it depends on what location you're talking about and how much, because each tree could be in a different location and depending on what infrastructure is there, because we could have had trees 10 or 15 years ago, and back when we may have lost a tree 10 or 15 years ago, the irrigation system might have been removed or capped. In some cases, the water meters that feed those irrigation systems may have been removed as well because they weren't used anymore. So it depends on the location, but each time we get a request for looking at replanting trees or putting more trees in, we do an assessment. We recently did this up in Councilwoman Stark's district in the 19th Avenue corridor, where there was a business group that wanted to reestablish trees in that area, and we had to go through and do an evaluation of the irrigation system there. And in some areas we had irrigation, some areas where we didn't, and we have to go back and replace it. What I would say is that the costs that are associated with when we're talking about the $400,000 or even in the tree donation porthole, that's going to be factored in there. So we are putting in a cost in there to make sure we do have irrigation systems in place to be able to do that.
So, okay, so I'm going to give you an area. I'm thinking 51st Avenue and Thomas, all up and down that corridor. It's bare. It's street. It's our land. It's right away. So when I donate, and it says disperse donations from public to fund the planting of new trees, where does the equity come in on where you determine where these trees go?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, it actually goes back to, I guess, initial question by you, Madam Chair. Really, how is it determined, the donations, and where are they allocated? And one of the reasons that we didn't specifically say we'll accept to say, hey, we want a tree on this street, was that the Urban Forest Infrastructure Team, which is made up of the departments shown here as well as other departments in the city, and together we'll look at and evaluate for equity purposes to recognize where our trees really needed most. Where are we hearing from the community that trees are needed? Where we recognize are the highest priorities. And it's that assessment that we'll do, and instead of, there are many places throughout the city, and we have a long list of projects that we'd want to do. And so that'll actually be also the core of our fundraising, to say, look, these are the types of projects we would like to plan for, and therefore we would look for donations to actually go towards projects that we consider as high priority. So in some cases, projects identified will be used to identify, to say, look, we would like to, as one of our projects for the coming year, to be able to plant trees here, and that's where donations will be used. But primarily, it will be that multi-department team looking together and evaluating where the highest and best priority for those investments.
So that takes me back, sorry, Betty. So that takes me back to the conversation that we had, very specifically, about equity and trees and where they really should go at this moment. And it takes me back to the conversation of, why don't we have areas or sections of saying, this program, I want to donate to Maryvale tree fundraising. And then I'm specifically, I'm earmarking my money to go specifically for trees in Maryvale. Or I want to donate for this area program to Happy Valley Road and 35th Avenue, I don't know, somewhere out there.
They're all dead.
And be able then to design programming around each of our districts so that then we can start putting trees into those areas and being targeted, and also looking at the equity piece and making sure every district is receiving trees. Those are some of my suggestions, because I'm not really, it's going to be very difficult, especially if we only get, say, $500. Then what are we going to, we're really going to have to make an effort to identify in our districts what areas or a collective, I look at it as Maryville as a collective of 3 districts that hit a certain area and make a big effort to make sure we get what we need to get out in our areas. So I hope from this point to formal, there's a huge discussion on maybe designing this in a way that it gets launched that way.
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, look forward to our conversations regarding this before formal. We certainly, this has been, many ideas that we've bounced back and forth among the staff teams. We recognize, as you said, a very high interest and passionate from the community of certain projects. And so we're looking at how we weigh those and prioritize those, and at the same time, make sure investments are going towards the most valuable projects and weighing those. And so we would love to have discussions with you and continue to engage as projects in your districts as ones we're considering. But it certainly look forward to further discussions as we look at how allocating that funding in the future and on special projects.
I mean, I also feel very strongly about that, just because if you're saying that you're going to go about it depending on what the input from the community is, there's a lot of parts of our community that are not going to have time to give that input and actually need the trees as well. So I think definitely working with the council for us to help you guys figure out where the needs are and making sure that it's balanced and that everyone gets their fair share, and also including the places where we need the trees the most. I think that's going to be incredibly important moving forward. And then also when we talk about replacing the trees that we're replacing because they're old and they went down with the thunderstorms, are we replacing them with the same type of trees, or are we putting in smaller trees? Because I know that's some of the concerns that I've heard out in the community, that sure, we're planting more trees, but we're not replacing the trees with the same type of tree they used to be there in the past. Like, is the quality the same? Are they as big? And will they have the same type of shade? Are we keeping track of that?
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, absolutely, it's the right tree, right place. In many cases, there were certain standards that we were using for planting trees, but our tree palette is really evolving, and the right tree, right place is considered very important, and which trees will last the longest, have the best canopy, most appropriate for that space. Like, for example, under power lines, you only want them to grow so high, where they're replacing, where, we've had to remove trees that are very difficult for those. So certainly putting the right tree, right place. That is actually, the goal is actually to grow our canopy. So that's very much part of the strategizing around what trees we're placing and where we prioritize them, and ensure that they have sufficient life to not just last a few years, but actually for ongoing survival.
Thank you.
When you say canopy, how close are you going to plant the trees together?
It would depend. In some cases, you can look for oasis-type planting projects where it's really appropriate to have a very nice and full canopy. But it really depends on the actual tree you're planting and how big their eventual canopy will be to make sure you're not placing them too close together.
Okay. So we do have some cards. Amy Esposito. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit short. So I'm one of the volunteers with the the Urban Heat Tree Shade Subcommittee. So I've spent about a year, probably about a year and a half now, working with a lot of amazing different volunteers on the subcommittee. I was chosen because I'm the executive director for a nonprofit here who focuses on increasing the tree canopy valley-wide called Trees Matter. And I just want to say that I would love for this to be approved. I do want to say that I would love to see a focus on maintenance and not just planting with the portal. So looking at maybe instead of it being about where you plant a tree, where your money goes for planting a tree, you have 90,000 trees in your service maybe adopting a tree for a year. $50 for a tree times 90,000, that could maybe do something, and then each year you can renew. It could be for birthday presents, it could be for lots of things like that. I do also want to encourage our community members to go to budget hearings and advocate for more funding in the budget for trees. And I'd also like to say that seeing these amazing departments here that touch all these programs on top of other departments, we really do need to have a direct contact as a community, a tree program manager, a tree czar, a tree administrator, whatever it is, to be that contact that's responsible for checking in with departments. And that is something we put as one of our main recommendations, along with a commission that follows up and gives the opportunity for community members to come in. Also, we do, if you are looking to plant trees, we don't have a large budget, but we are working with Cartwright District right now for planting trees. We just did Borman and Desert Sands, and we'll be doing another one at the Cartwright District and presented to their board. And so we're really excited to help with schools as well and provide any insight going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. C.J. Hager.
I'm a little taller, so I get a good afternoon, everyone. I'm C.J. Eisenbarth Hager, and I work for Vitalist Health Foundation. And like Amy, I was on the subcommittee that came up with the recommendations that includes this tree portal. And I just want to reiterate that from a public health standpoint, this is an exceptionally important step. Not everyone and not every community is created equal with respect to shade and the need for shade. And so I truly appreciate the conversation about being very thoughtful about where people are and who needs to have shade on a daily basis. While we all need shade, there are certain folks that are more prone to heat-related illnesses. So just again, thanks for the leadership in providing this, and we really look forward to the continued discussion. While this is just one of the subcommittee's recommendations, there are 3 or 4 others that we think will support this effort even more. So thank you.
Thank you. Stacy Champion.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. A large part of why we're here today is because just over 2 years ago, there were some trees in Renaissance Square that were taken down, and there was a big community outcry, and I had set up a petition. Thousands of people signed it. That sparked myself and Sean Sweat to set up a citizen-led committee for this issue, which we did about 2-ish years ago now. We presented a 9-page guideline, basically, ordinance guidelines to the city. We then had to do a petition of 1, and now here we are 2+ years later, and in the 5th largest city in the country that is in the bullseye of climate change. We've been breaking heat records every year. We have terrible air quality. We have been breaking heat death records every year. This is a plan that was made in 2010. It's now 2020. For those of you who have been on the commission, I would ask, where have you been? I've been down here talking about sustainability and environmental justice issues for the last 13 years, basically. And we don't have time to wait, number one. 2, if the 5th largest city in the country is not prioritizing what should be viewed as public health infrastructure, quite frankly, and every department making a budget for this, and why, again, we're 10 years into it now, but we don't have time to keep doing this. But if the 5th largest city in the country's answer is to have public donations pay for city trees, I think we're all insane to think that that's going to tip the scale. I think that not only should the city have made this issue a priority 10 years ago when this plan was adopted, but I mean, if this is the answer, like, I'm embarrassed for us, quite frankly. I am. I mean, this is, I appreciate it, and I totally appreciate all the work that the subcommittee has done. But if the big hurrah today is we're going to have a portal for people to donate money to buy the city trees, like, that's ridiculous. I mean, we are in the bullseye of climate change. Our underserved communities, numerous studies have been done on how much hotter they are, on how much worse the pollution is. I mean, trees are it's public health infrastructure. If you guys don't start viewing this as a massive public health issue, like now, and take it seriously and push the ball faster, like, this city is in very big trouble. And so, yes, I'm supportive of this. I personally think that it's something, but again, this is embarrassing for us as a city, in my opinion. So faster, make it a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two cards that say they do not wish to speak. Sarah Porter in support, and Dwayne Allen. Change your minds? Hearing none? Okay, do we have a motion on this item? To accept staff's recommendation?
I make a motion for item number 9, tree program update and the new donation portal.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. And I know you put a lot of time in on this, so thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we're more than happy to be here today to talk to you about an update to our pilot program, electronic scooter shared program in the downtown area. With me today is Brianna Velez, our assistant director, who's been very much involved in developing the scooter program and also being involved in as it's been underway. Before we get started, I just want to mention that this is an item for information and discussion, but I will tell you that we would welcome any input and guidance the subcommittee may have as we are in the interim portion of this 6-month pilot program, and we're looking obviously towards the future of what happens when the 6-month pilot program is over with. So we'll have an opportunity at the end of it to be able to get any feedback and hopefully get some discussion with the subcommittee members. I did want to mention this pilot program. As we do have some new members on the subcommittee since this came through subcommittee the last time before summer recess. And so we're going to go a little bit of a history on this, but I did want to acknowledge the folks who helped us get here. We had a lot of work with the vendors getting to the pilot program, and there was a lot of interaction and discussion and collaboration with them. I want to point out the Phoenix Community Alliance, who brought it to our attention and requested a pilot program. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the council members who all spent time, many hours briefing and talking about this pilot program before we get started. And then obviously our community as well, because we did a lot of community outreach and feedback and getting to where we are with the pilot program. So a little bit of brief history here. The pilot program started out when we thought we were going to have potentially 5 to 6 vendors as part of the pilot program, because we were talking with 5 to 6 vendors leading up to the approval of the pilot program. When it all said and done, when we had a permit process for this, we had 3 firms come in and ask and request for permits, and we granted 3 permits to them, and those were for Bird, Lime, and Spin. As we went through this process, the program did launch on September 16th, and it is a 6-month pilot program. So it is set to expire on March 16th of 2020, so in a couple months. And some of the aspects of this program, first is 18 years old or older to ride. That was one of the things that, working with council, that we saw what other cities were doing as well, that having that 18-year-old restriction was something we wanted to have as part of our program, and also possessing a valid driver's license to help verify the age of the riders. Some unique things about Phoenix as well, our program is a designated parking locations, and we might get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but that was maybe something we were doing unique here, but that is, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are being watched as a program across the country, and especially in this regard, and seeing how this function and this works. I think this is very forward thinking of the council to have this in there and thinking about how this works in the future of the program. And also sidewalk riding was prohibited as part of this one.
I have a question, and I don't know if you're going to go through it with the geo mapping.
Yes.
Will you mention that, or
Yes.
or geofencing?
I wasn't going to let her note it here for the pilot
Okay.
program, but we will be talking about the geofencing. But I will mention as well that because it's a downtown scooter pilot program, we did work through the boundaries, the downtown area where the program would function, so where you could ride a scooter. And then within that pilot program area, those boundaries, we do actually have areas where it's geofenced where people cannot ride, Convention Center being one, the parks as being one. Also through ASU's downtown campus areas, there are restrictions in geofencing in those areas as well.
Kenny, my question, I'm following that up with, my question is, when we started the pilot program, because that was specifically was one of my concerns, was the geofencing, which companies did have the technology for the geofencing?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, all three went through the process when we were going through the permitting process, because when they submitted for permits, our staff did a validation with their technology and their equipment to ensure that each of them could meet those geofencing restrictions. Now, it depends on, sometimes what we found is which version of the technology we were looking at. And so we know with some of the older scooters that are on the market that the geofencing is much more difficult to comply with our requirements. But the newer versions of some of those scooters are the ones that we did test out. And so that's what we found. There was some disconnect sometime between the newer generation of scooters and the older generation of scooters that may have been deployed. But we'll get through a little bit more and talking about some of the issues and the concerns with the GPS technology as well. So even though I'm going to be talking a little bit here with the scooter numbers were at the program launch on September 16th, I did mention that we were expecting 5 to 6 vendors, 3 vendors we ended up issuing permits to. So with that, we had a limit of 300 scooters per vendor. So with those 3 vendors, we were expecting up to 900 scooters in the downtown area. We have 350 plus parking locations, and those have multiple locations or opportunities to be able to park scooters in each one of those locations. So we have plenty of parking spaces available for up to 900 scooters or even potentially beyond that. But on launch date, Bird had 50 scooters, Lime had 150, and Spin had the maximum of 300 scooters. Now, shortly after the launch of the scooter program, one of the vendors, Bird, notified us that they would not continue participating in the pilot program, and so they pulled their scooters from operation in the downtown area. And after a while of contemplation, we always were expecting up to 900 scooters in the pilot program with the 3 vendors. And so we authorized, through the authority I had through the program, was to authorize an increase in the limit, and that's something I know we came and talked to each one of the council members about that as well, from 300 to 450 scooters. So now each one of the vendors have up to 450 to be able to deploy on the city streets. So current active scooter fleet, Bird has 0, as we mentioned, Lime is at 300, and Spin is at 450. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brianna to take you through the balance of the presentation.
Thank you, Kenny. As part of the program requirements, vendors are required to provide monthly data to the city on the number of daily trips, the average ride time and distance, the number of scooter trips, as well as the number of scooters deployed. Based on the 3-month data, we're seeing approximately 4,500 trips per week, 2 trips per scooter per day, an average of 7 minutes per scooter trip, as well as a distance of 1 mile per trip. So as part of the permit requirements, there are two types of violations, an impound and a relocation. And so one of the requirements is the vendors are required to pick up the scooters each and every night at midnight. And so if a scooter is not picked up by midnight, the city will collect the scooter, impound it, and assess a fee to the vendor. In addition to, the vendors are also required to relocate any improperly or discarded scooters within 2 hours of notification. If they do not pick up and relocate that scooter within 2 hours, the city will then pick up and relocate the scooter and assess a fee. The city did contract with the scooter retrieval company, Sweep. Sweep is responsible for monitoring, reporting, and correcting any of the violations. Sweep is a company that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays. To date, for the 3-month update, the Sweep has reported 242 violations, 3 with bird, 230 with lime, and 9 with spin. Okay.
So what were those violations for?
So those violations were for either not picking up the scooters at midnight, and so they may have left some scooters out beyond midnight. And I will tell you, in the beginning, it was a learning curve for them. When you're thinking about having to pick up 300 scooters, maybe the thought was, hey, we could start at 11 and collect all of the scooters, and maybe found that they weren't able to collect them all in time. And so in the beginning, it was a trial and error process for our vendors to determine at what time they needed to actually start collecting the scooters. In addition to, it could be that we notified them that a scooter was improperly parked or abandoned and they had 2 hours to pick it up. If they did not, then we would go and collect the scooter and assess the fee.
So then were the violations more at the beginning and they're lesser now, or was it the other way around?
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Guardado, absolutely. We saw more of the violations in the beginning when they were trying to work through the operations of their team.
And what would you say are the violations for the last month, more or less?
You have the data.
So we do have the data. I don't have that specifically on me, but we can actually provide you that data if you want to look at specifically the last month.
That'd be great.
So as far as the program fees and revenue, the intention of the program was that the fees collected were going to reimburse the city for the cost of administering the program. And so there was a $500 application fee as well as a $5,000 permit fee. So for the 3 vendors, the city did invoice $16,500. There's also a 10-cent surcharge fee for every scooter trip. And so to date, for the 3 months, the city has invoiced approximately $5,800 worth for the surcharge fee. For the 242 violations, the fee assessment is $80, and so that has resulted in $19,360. So as part of the permit requirements, as Keeney mentioned, there are close to 400 designated parking locations. And so as part of that, the permit requirements stipulated that the vendors had to reimburse the city for installing those 400 locations. And so for materials and labor, that was about $61,000, and all 3 vendors were invoiced for 1/3 the amount of the $61,000. That's a one-time charge. As far as the program administration costs, right now we're looking at approximately 20 hours of staff time per week to administer this program. And so for the 3 months, that's approximately $20,000. And to date, for the 3 months, we have paid Sweep close to $25,000 for the services that they provide. So the total revenue that has been invoiced is about $42,000, and the total cost is approximately $45,000. So close but not fully cost recovery at this point. Staff created a dedicated email account and phone number and webpage to not only collect feedback, but to address any and all concerns related with the pilot program. To date, we've only received 30 emails and phone calls, with the top most frequent concerns and comments being related to improper scooter parking, abandoned scooters, and sidewalk riding.
So is that where I'm supposed to call, Keeney, instead of calling you?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, you can call me anytime you want. We'll take care of it, and same with Brad.
I just want to know so that it gets documented.
It does.
Okay, thank you.
As far as additional information worth noting, I think it's important to note that the riders did quickly adapt to the unique parking requirements. As Kenny mentioned, this is something the City of Phoenix was forward thinking on. We've had several cities contact us who are now in the process of implementing designated parking locations within their own scooter programs as well. There have been challenges with the civilian grade GPS. And so some of the concerns we've heard from the vendors is that users have called and said, hey, I'm in a designated parking location and I'm not able to end my ride. Or they're within an appropriate ride zone, but it is near a no ride zone, and their scooter slows down to approximately 3 to 4 miles per hour. So obviously this isn't military grade GPS, and so we've seen some of those issues as it relates to the geofencing requirements.
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Pastor, I wanted to mention as well that I think what you were getting to at the beginning was we did have an issue with one of the vendors, I think it was Lime, that was in the first couple weeks of the program did have difficulties in meeting this requirement, and I think that was, and I'll let them speak to it if they'd like to speak to it later, but we understand it was the version of the scooters that they had out there, and they had to go back and get that taken care of, and once they were able to get that so it could dock correctly and check out correctly from our locations, then they were able to redeploy their scooters once they met our requirements. And that was just maybe a week or something, like the delay after they had taken their scooters off at the beginning of the program.
So basically, they had to modernize, they had to get up to the technology that you were experienced and modernize the scooter because what was deployed was not what you guys experienced in the geofencing. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, thank you.
So to date, there have been 5 reported scooter-related incidents, and so I just wanted to call out an error in the report. It did say that there had been 0 collisions with motor vehicles. Of the 5 incidents, 2 did involve collisions with motor vehicles, but I just wanted to note that there were no serious injuries associated with all 5 incidents that have been reported to date. So as far as the conclusion so far at the 3-month date, staff has been effectively able to administer the program. Overall, the public feedback has been very favorable and supportive of the program. Vendors are providing encouraging ridership numbers. And so as we think about the future of this program, there is a potential after the 6-month mark to consider any potential program refinements. It could be anything from expanding the program boundary, consideration for removal of the requirement to pick up the scooters nightly. It could be bike lane marking improvements, as well as a review of the fees associated with the program. So as we look at the next steps, this month, staff is going to be going out and doing community follow-up meetings with the intent to gather additional feedback. We will also be providing a public survey this month as well to collect additional feedback from any and all residents or users of the service. Staff will be compiling a complete program summary of the 6-month pilot program with all of the data and community feedback we've collected for the 6-month pilot program, which will also include recommendations on the future of the pilot program. And as Kenny mentioned, this program does conclude on March 16, 2020, and we will be coming forward to council for further consideration.
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, as we reach the end here, as I mentioned, we were hoping, looking for potential, any questions you might have or any guidance you might provide as well related to kind of what Brandon was talking about. We're a little less than, or a little more than 2 months out from the expiration of the program. I know we have 2 subcommittee meetings in February and March before that expiration, but we have a number of council formal meetings as well if we wanted to extend the program. So we're obviously want to have some conversations about that, so we're better prepared and recommendations coming back to the subcommittee on the future of the program.
Does it end on the 31st of March? No contract extension, you have to go out for RFP?
Madam Chair, it actually ends on March 16th. So March 17th, it would be the end of the pilot program. And that's how the city code changes were put in as well. So it would self-expire if there were no extension to the program. So it will require city code changes to be able to extend the program beyond.
So you can do that without an RFP? I'm just saying, if there's going to be a big gap between when they're available and when they come back and be available?
So there are really two ways that we've seen cities approach this. Some have used an RFP where they've selected vendors out of a process. Others ones that we've done on the pilot program here is doing it through permit, where you don't really necessarily limit the number of vendors out there, but you do potentially limit the number of vendors out there by the boundaries and the constraints you have in the pilot program. Not all the vendors out there can meet the requirements that Phoenix deems necessary and important for the success of this program in Phoenix. So our intent is to make sure we don't have a gap after March 16th, and this subcommittee would play a very important role in what happens after March 16th.
Okay, thank you. I have some cards. Do you want to hear the cards?
Yeah, maybe we should hear from I know some of the
Tim
industry
Alvord?
leaders are here,
He's over there.
and then we can respond.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Tim Alborg. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Spin. Spin is very excited to be one of the few scooter companies operating here in Phoenix. Ours are, in fact, the orange scooters. But Spin is owned by the Ford Motor Company and prides itself on being the most collaborative micromobility company in the marketplace today. We're also proud to have delivered the most scooter rides here during the pilot with the fewest violations of the rules. And I'd like to take a moment to thank in particular Chris Ewell, Brianna Velez, and Michael Cano as well for doing an amazing job of managing the pilot so far. It's been overwhelmingly positive from our perspective, and we look forward to continuing to work with staff and council as we move towards the end of the pilot and into a permanent program. One innovative tool that I wanted to mention today that Spin is excited to bring to market, such as Phoenix, is our Spin Hub charging stations. And these charging stations can decrease VMT and carbon emissions from our delivery vehicles when parking and charging infrastructure is installed in collaboration with our city partners. We've provided a proposal to staff to establish a Spin Hub pilot at 3 places that are already marked as designated parking locations here in Phoenix. So a charging station pilot would allow Phoenix to experience what a difference these hubs can make during the current phase of the scooter program. We're happy to share with you any additional information you need about this charging station pilot and hope to have your support for staff to move forward with Spin on a pilot as soon as possible. In summary, Spin will continue to be a collaborative partner with the city. Looks forward to working with each of you to provide a safe and sustainable scooter experience to residents and visitors in Phoenix. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next is Ryan Morris.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Ryan Morris. I'm the operations manager for Lime here in the Phoenix area. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback on the shared electric scooter pilot program in the city, of which Lime has been honored to participate. We appreciate the thoughtful way that the City of Phoenix has approached soliciting public feedback and taking an experimental approach with the pilot. Lime participated in several community outreach meetings in advance of the pilot to understand and address concerns, and we have worked closely with the Downtown Phoenix Community Alliance to bring our First Ride Safety Academy event to Phoenix riders. We have communicated with riders about the rules of the road, including sidewalk riding and the preferred parking corrals, and we continue to work close and coordinate with city staff to ensure that we are providing the greatest value to the city and to riders. I also want to add that our working relationship with the city staff has been very pleasant and transparent. The city has been very nice to work with, and I'm grateful for the partnership that we've been able to foster over the last couple of months. It is in that interest that I want to share some learnings from the first 3 months of the pilot, which expand on but consistent with observations made in the staff report. As the staff report indicates, Spin and Lime are getting an average of 2 trips per vehicle per day, which is a relatively low utilization rate. Lime individually has seen on average less than that, during which should be good weather months for the Phoenix area, which should be a peak scooter ridership time. For reference, in other markets, we typically see at least 3 trips per vehicle per day as a reasonable utilization, especially in a downtown core where we'd expect even higher ridership. So where are these constraints affecting ridership? We think that they come from 2 primary constraints. The first constraint is the nightly pickup. As staff referenced, the pilot requires scooter operators to physically remove the scooters from the corrals every night between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. This typically requires that we start removing the scooters starting around 10 p.m. and begin deploying them again at 5 a.m., sometimes taking until 7 a.m. or later to complete deployment. The large majority of these scooters still have significant battery life, making it extremely inefficient to remove them as they do not actually need to be charged every single night. This significantly impacts the commuter's ability to use them for first mile and last mile connections and those who work late hours, restaurant workers, custodians, et cetera, from accessing the scooters in an inexpensive form of transportation. The handful of cities that limit hours of ridership primarily do so by simply requiring us to make scooters non-operational. That is, we can essentially shut down the ability for anyone to rent a scooter between the hours of 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., allowing that those that are left on the street have sufficient battery life to remain locked in the street, in the corral, so that they can be easily unlocked as soon as they become operational again at 5 a.m. We respectfully recommend the city consider allowing operators to make scooters non-operational during the hours of 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the last half of the pilot. The second constraint is the geofence parking corrals. Phoenix is the only city where we are required to geofence each and every corral. It has been an interesting and challenging endeavor to determine if it can successfully eliminate poor parking behavior without greatly affecting utilization. What we have determined based on Lime Rider feedback and also noted in the staff report is that the technical limitations of geofencing have been a significant obstacle to usage. Because of the inaccuracies inherent with all civilian geofencing technology, riders often become frustrated with the technology because they can't start or end a ride, or they don't like the fact that it's slowing down in the slow zone, et cetera. And they get discouraged from riding scooters as often as they otherwise would. Again, I really do appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on behalf of Lime and our Phoenix riders, and I'll be around happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for everybody to know, David Swartz had a card in and donated his time to Brian. So you have a question?
Yeah, I did. So what do you consider significant battery charge? Like what, right? Because what I'm nervous about is that we leave a scooter out that's maybe 60% charged, right? And then the next day by 3, 4 o'clock, that scooter is no longer, right, it's on the sidewalk. So what do you consider sufficiently charged?
So that essentially, in short, it's about 25%. That allows at least enough for, on average, 2 more rides. The stats show that the trips are close to a mile. On a full battery charge, our scooters can go between 15 and 20 miles. And when they're not getting a trip, they lose battery very, very seldom. So we're essentially, the average battery of the scooters when we pull them from the streets every single night is greater than 70%. And they really don't need to be charged until they get down to that 25% threshold. So that's what I meant by it's inefficient to do so.
So then, from your experience, if you leave it out, if it's 70%, and you leave it out there, how much longer will it live before it dies?
It would depend on ridership, and it would depend on how often the scooter is being unlocked and taken for a ride, what the average length of that ride is. But again, on average, if I were to guesstimate from my experience at 70%, it could stay out there for at least 2 more days with our current ridership. Thank you.
Yeah, so kudos on the corral. That was a great idea, because I got to tell you, looking at some other cities that have these e-scooters, they just spill all over the place, but they really are returning where they should, and I really appreciate that. It looks very neat and orderly out there. And I was surprised about how much they're being used. I had commented when I met with downtown Phoenix that I hadn't seen anyone riding, and then she sent over the numbers. I was like, I must be walking in the wrong parts of downtown, because there's quite a few rides, and I got to say, it's been great. I'm kind of siding with the e-scooters with regards to having to pick them up every night. If there's still a way that we can control and keep them in the corrals, and I think that's part of the reason why we wanted to pick them up every night, was to make sure they didn't spill all over the city. If there's a way we can assure that they would be in the corrals, I'm okay with you not having to pick them all up. And as a matter of fact, Spin had, where did Spin go? Oh, I'm sorry. You had said that you actually have now a charging station, and that might actually be an incentive to keep them or get them back to where they belong. But I gotta say, I was not a believer in the beginning of this. I was worried about accidents and just violations, and it seems to be working. So I'm willing to give a little bit more flexibility, but I would want Keeney, you to have the authority over that. But so just my thoughts. The geo spotting, I still can't get my arms around that.
So I actually want to give kudos to the council members that actively worked on it. No, that actively work on it, and staff, because I think what you're seeing is why you're seeing what you're seeing is because we were very conscientious of our city and making sure that there were very few accidents and making sure that the city was not held liable, that we were making sure the city was clean and walkable, and that it stayed within the zone that we designated as the zone, which is the geofencing. So I want to say kudos to all of us for it working. I do understand the charging piece. I do understand the battery life. I'm willing to be a little flexible on that area as long as they're not landing in our sidewalks. So we have 2 months. So I'm willing to even the charging station to see if that works in the sense of seeing, okay, it's working. But what I like about our city is that scooters are not all over the place. And I'm not jumping over them, like in Scottsdale and Tempe, and they're in the area that they're designated to be in. Now, Spin, I do want to say something. It was twice in my experience, right here on Adams, and First, that I almost got hit twice because scooters were on the sidewalk. So somehow we have to, with the technology of these scooters, to make sure that they need to know that it's the streets they need to be on and not the sidewalks. Our sidewalks are not wide enough to share at this moment. Maybe in the future if we do reduced lanes or something, but I just think we have to really do a bigger education piece that they need to be in the designated areas of riding them. But I'm open to some flexibility because to me it's a pilot, a 2-month pilot. If it doesn't work, we can always just pull it back and start and go back to what we've done. So.
I also agree. I think I was very new on the council when we were talking about this, and I think that was one of my biggest concerns, making sure that they didn't become eyesores for the city. And I think given everything that we've done and how the program has gone, I think it's going very well. I'm also open to the flexibility in terms of picking them up, but I think at the same time I want to make sure that we stay strong on the accountability in terms of if they're not being dropped off where they should be dropped off, we should continue with the fees. But I'm also very open, it's a pilot program, open to trying new things, like charging them where they're parked. I'm open to that as well. So I agree with my colleagues, right, that it's a pilot program and that we should be flexible in terms of the pickups, but I do feel very strongly that they do not become an eyesore for the city.
If I can just add, I want to say kudos to the council. I know you were very, very involved in this, Councilwoman Pastor, but it is kind of fun to hear that other cities are looking to us with the corrals and some of the ideas that we came up with collectively. So I'm kind of proud of that.
I'm very supportive of, I think it's a time for testing, and it's gone very well so far. I'd really like to see you talk with them and maybe try out a couple other options in addition to what we're doing now. I'm very supportive of that. but I'm hoping in the future it doesn't cost us money.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, definitely, as Brianna alluded to, I think this is an opportunity for us to look at the fees and that we have this program to make sure this is cost recovery. I thank the subcommittee for the feedback as well. I definitely would want to talk with both council members, Garcia and Minokowski, who are in, who the pilot program is in their districts, to be able to talk with them, make sure they're okay with any changes to the permits and how we operate with the scooters being taken off at night. But that's definitely something we could accommodate and evaluate in the next remaining 2 months of the program.
We do have 3 cards, all in favor, that say they do not necessarily wish to speak. John Brodsky? Oh, I knew he couldn't resist.
He loves to talk. We know John loves to talk.
Councilwoman Williams, members of the committee, just very happy to be here. As has been stated, Phoenix Community Alliance helps support and advocate for the pilot program for education, for safety as this has moved through. We're very glad to see the program is going well as a micro-mobility solution for riders in downtown Phoenix. One of the scooter companies did bring us up the question of the pickup between midnight and 5 a.m. We're supportive of the flexibility that you are talking about, and we support that change so it really can help assess the program and make this the best program during the pilot program, make it the best program for the users in downtown Phoenix. Thanks.
Thank you. Cindy Doggett? Okay.
Oh.
Cy Jones? You, same, okay. Do we have action on this item? That I don't think so. We're just making suggestions that you could take to heart.
I have another question. So just in this pilot piece, from the 12 to 5 a.m., if, I guess they lock it, I'll use the term lock. I think that's what I heard. It's locked, but however, if it's locked on the sidewalk, we're still gonna pick them up. That's my understanding. So it doesn't really shift our program. What it's just shifting is that they're gonna have the ability to be locked in the corrals.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, it's exactly correct. So
Okay.
from the 12 to 5, they would have to be in a corral if they are deemed at a chargeable level, and they'd have to be locked as well, so they could not be ridden or rented during that time frame as well.
And if they're not locked,
They'd be subject to
then we
violations.
would be subject to violation and fees.
That's correct.
And I hope they have the modern technology to lock it. The joke. The other piece, I forgot what my other question was on the geofencing. I'm not willing to budge on the geofencing. I just wanted a record.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is item 11, Water Services, Capital Improvement Program.
Madam Chair, council members, we always do a good job of clearing the room for you.
Very
Want to
so.
note
What
that.
are you doing, Catherine?
I don't know, I think it's fascinating, but it's not shared. As you know, Phoenix Water Services supplies safe, clean water to about 1.7 million people across 540 square miles. We also safely collect wastewater across our service territory and then treat that wastewater in protection of the environment for about 2.5 million people in the Valley of the Sun. Phoenix Water Services is actually one of the largest utilities in the country, and this is just a massive undertaking. It's also very complicated, and it entails the continual management of and investment in infrastructure. It really is the condition of our infrastructure that is the basis of our ability to provide these services. So our capital improvement program is extremely important to us. We maintain around 1.7 million assets, which, as you can imagine, is quite a few. To do this, our proposed 6-year capital improvement program totals close to $3.4 billion between the water and wastewater programs combined. As always, our largest expenditures are in pipelines. We also continue our focus on the continual rehabilitation and replacement of aging infrastructure, and of course on our water resiliency efforts. I also wanted you guys to know that we do prioritize our capital projects through a very rigorous and formal process that involves the age, condition, criticality, and risk of these assets so that we can be responsible in the way we spend our money and respectful of ratepayer money. Here with me today are two incredible women. Darlene Helm is in charge of our water engineering group, and Patty Kennedy is in charge of our wastewater engineering group. They're going to take you through a pretty high-level presentation of our capital improvement program. And then if you guys have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I'll start with our water capital program.
Are you on?
Is it on?
Yeah, it's on.
Yep.
Okay.
Speak a little louder for you. So our total CIP budget for the water program for the current year plus the 5 years is $2.066 billion. And that's broken down by 6 major sections that correlate to the water system. So we have pipelines at $770 million. Like Catherine mentioned, that's the largest portion of our capital program. Our Colorado River portion of the program is $530 million. Plants, our water treatment plants, are $400 million. Our pumps are $184.4 million. And then our energy, technology, and facility section is $108 million, almost $109 million there. And then our storage is $71.7 million. So just some information about the water system. Like Catherine mentioned, we serve 1.7 million people on the water system through 7,000 miles of pipeline. We have 5 water treatment plants and 192 reservoirs, wells, and pumps throughout our water system. So what you're looking at here is a chart of those 7,000 miles of pipe and installed by decade. And what we want you to note is that about 41% of our pipelines were installed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which makes sense because that was during our growth, a high growth period for Phoenix. But that's important to note because the average pipe life expectancy is 75 years. So currently, over 1,800 miles of pipe are 50 years and older. So we're an aging system. So that's why we're spending the $770 million in the CIP to renew our aging pipeline. So we, like Catherine mentioned, we have an asset management-based program where we use risk to determine which types of projects we put in the capital program. So the focus for small mains is the water main replacement programs you see through the neighborhoods. And then for our large pipelines, we go in and inspect and assess and then determine when we need to replace or rehabilitate the pipelines. And so our next major part of the CIP is preparing for drought on the Colorado River. So I just want to mention that we will have an in-depth presentation at the land use subcommittee next week, but we wanted to give you just a quick overview of this large program in the capital presentation. So 97% of our water comes from surface water, with 50% from the Salton Verde and 47% from Colorado River. So we need to be prepared for drought. The map that you see that you're looking at, the dark blue portion of the city of Phoenix there is served by Salt and Verde River. And then the very, very light blue portion up there on the map is our northern service area, which is served by Colorado River water. That means about over 400,000 people get water from the Colorado River system. And since our main function is that we need to serve all of our customers with water at any point, we need to make sure that we're prepared for drought. So we did an internal study to see if there were restrictions on the Colorado River system, would we have enough water available in our SRP system? And we do, because of careful planning and managing our water resources. We just need the infrastructure to move that water up to the northern portions of our system. So the infrastructure that we need to install are some large pipelines and pump stations. So you're looking at a map zoomed in with, towards the left is I-17, towards the right is the SR-51, and then the Loop 101 to the north. So we need to install a large pipeline in the area of 24th Street in Lincoln north to 32nd Street in Shea, and then continue that 66-inch pipeline from Shea up to 32nd Street in Bell. We need to also install a 42-inch pipeline in 35th Avenue from Thunderbird to Grover's, and then install 4 large booster pump stations in order to ensure that we can get that water from our southern system to our northern system. In addition to the pipeline and pumps that we need to install, we also are drilling more wells in the area currently served by Colorado River water. So currently we get about 3% of our water supply from 22 existing wells in our system, and we plan to develop 18 new wells to ensure that we have adequate access to groundwater and to be able to pump the surface water that's been banked underground for recovery during times of shortages. So these new wells that we intend to install by December of 2023 will double our well capacity. Another major section in our capital program is our water treatment plants. So we have 5 water treatment plants, like I mentioned, that can treat 610 million gallons per day. And at these 5 plants, we have over 21,000 assets. So the capital program, we use asset management-based system to go in and assess the condition of the assets and then determine which of those 21,000 assets need to be replaced. So the picture you're looking at there is we are doing a major upgrade at our Union Hills water treatment plant. We're replacing all of the electrical gear there, so it's a major undertaking right now. And then our pump stations, we have 106 pump stations throughout the water system, which pump 1.1 billion gallons per day. Our oldest pump station was built in 1953, and we need our pumps because they help us serve about 3/4 of our customers, so they're very critical to our system. The $184 million in the CIP goes to basically replacing and rehabbing the assets at our pump stations. The picture there you're looking at is a rendering of a pump station that's under construction right now. The existing pump station is operational, and then we're building the new pump station on a piece of property across the street from that pump station, and we worked with fire department to use some of their property, so collaboration effort there. And then our storage system, so we have 22 concrete reservoirs and 42 steel tanks throughout our water system, and we store over 430 million gallons in those reservoirs, our oldest one being built in 1948. So this program, again, we're just mostly maintaining that infrastructure. So what you're looking at, there's a picture of one of our older reservoirs where we went in and we removed the roof and the liner, and then we're replacing it with a new liner and roof so that we can hopefully get another 25 or 30 years out of that reservoir. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patty for the wastewater.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I like to think that we saved the best for last. I'm going to tell you all about wastewater. I know, that's great. So our wastewater capital program is $1.3 billion. That's for, again, the current year plus 5 years, very similar to water. A lot of our programs follow along the same path that water does. So it's broken up into 5 different categories. The largest is plants at $539 million, followed closely by pipelines, $518 million. Energy, technology, and facilities at $147 million. Lift stations at $67 million, and reuse at $36.7 million. Now let me tell you a little bit about our system. We provide wastewater services to 2.5 million residents. We have over 5,000 miles of sewer lines. We have 3 wastewater treatment plants. I'll talk more about them in the next slide. and we have 94,000 manholes in the system. It's a lot of miles of sewer line and manholes to keep track of. So our plants, we have 3 wastewater treatment plants. 2 are currently online and active. 1 was taken offline, but we're in the process of going through a design to bring that one back online. Of our 2 active plants that we have, 1 is a joint facility owned by City of Phoenix and 4 other local municipalities, and they all send wastewater down to the 91st Avenue treatment plant. All 3 of our plants have a capacity of 301 million gallons a day. And in our plants, we have over 24,000 assets, almost 25,000 assets. Similar to the water mains, our sewer pipelines, the large portion of it was also installed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so you can see from the figure here, it really follows very closely to the water side of things. 57% of our pipelines were installed prior to 1980. So, and we have a very robust process that we go through too, where we do CCTV, closed circuit TV, where we inspect the inside of our sewer lines. We have a large diameter program. We have a small diameter program. We're using new technologies to figure out, pipe thickness. A lot of great projects going on. Very exciting on the wastewater side. We also have lift stations. We have 29 lift stations in our system. So wastewater, for the most part, flows by gravity, although we do have times when we do need to make wastewater flow uphill. So in that case, when we either need to, for geography reasons, or we've got hills or mountains in the way, we've got lift stations that pump it through force main. So we've got 29 lift stations. They have a capacity to move over 80 million gallons a day. And we have 70 miles of force mains. So again, the force mains are coming out of the lift station. It goes through a force main and then hits a point where we can again flow by gravity down to one of our treatment plants. And in the system, we have 43 odor control stations. So again, we want to be able to treat the odors. Either we either treat it by chemical addition, or we treat the air that's coming out of the system. So we have 43 of those stations. We go through a very rigorous process to make sure all of our systems that we are spending the right money at the right time. I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Okay. With that, we're happy to take any questions you might have.
I guess more of a comment. In the water presentation, you talked about having to move water north, but part of the projects will also help existing pipelines in the southern portion of the city, correct?
So that's correct. So
it's not just bringing water up north, it's also...
So, Chairwoman, council members, that's correct. So we have a very comprehensive program where we look at all 7,000 miles of our pipelines. And so we have a program to look at the large transmission mains. We have a program to look at the medium diameter pipes and then the smaller pipes as well. The bulk of our money goes towards the smaller mains, the older ones in older neighborhoods. We're continually replacing and rehabilitating those pipelines. But to your specific question, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get there. I'll have you do that while I talk. So regarding our ability to move water from the southern portion of our system into the northern portion of our system, yeah, that's correct. There are some existing transmission mains that were installed in the 1970s. They are old, they are critical, they need to be replaced. But we are also contemplating installing new mains, new transmission mains that allow us to push even more water into the northern portion of our service territory.
And so you're trying to coordinate the project so it's the least amount of pain for our residents?
Okay. Madam Chairman, council members. Yeah, and again, we will go through this in great depth next week at the Land Use Subcommittee meeting, but absolutely. We have 2 separate but related projects going on at the neighborhood near 22nd Street and Glendale. One is the rehabilitation and replacement of a 48-inch pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipeline. That pipeline has been identified as the most at-risk transmission main in our system. And the recommendation from the engineering company that did the assessment is that we replace it as soon as possible. We will be replacing that pipeline. At the same time, we have a need to install a new 66-inch pipeline. Those two projects unfortunately occur in the same neighborhood, and there will be impacts to that neighborhood. We will minimize those impacts to the greatest extent possible, but we will talk about that in depth at our meeting next week.
I always have to listen to constituents say, what's a pump station and why would you need to pump? And I always thought it was interesting until you tell them, think of the topography in this city.
Yes, yeah, yep. So that's what I tell people too as well, is that you think that Phoenix is flat, but we actually have elevation. And in order to get the water we need to, we have to give it a little extra push to push it up that hill or up that elevation. So yes.
And you go under freeways, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We go everywhere we need to go. We have 77 different pressure stations or pressure zones, which is actually a very large number of pressure zones because of our topography. And you know, you've heard me talk about the nexus between water and energy because of our need to move water across 540 square miles and up hills and over. We are a very large consumer of energy. One of the areas of focus for our capital improvement program is actually on energy conservation. There's a lot that we can do with making sure we're operating with the most efficient pumps, that we're ensuring power redundancy. So that's also an important portion of our capital improvement program.
And I think if I remember right, you also told one of the reasons the new pipes are necessary is for leakage, that you lose a lot of water from leakage.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, absolutely. You can imagine, we have 7,000 miles of pipe. We can experience a break on any portion of that 7,000 miles. In addition to that, we have 440,000 service lines. Those are the lines that connect from the main line in the street to the customer's home or the business, as it may be. Any point of that system can fail. And so we are continually chasing leaks. Our plan, though, obviously we will repair leaks as soon as we practically can. And that's very important in terms of minimizing water loss in our system. But more to your point, Councilwoman, what we want to do is be proactive about that. We want to go into neighborhoods and replace old substandard mains that are leaking so that we prevent them from leaking in the first place. And just this last year, the City Council approved our very first contract to go in and proactively replace service lines across entire neighborhoods where we know those service lines are old galvanized lines or old plastic lines that are substandard. So we're hoping that as that contract, comes into fruition and we get going on that, that we'll see fewer and fewer water loss in our system.
Great. Yeah. I always appreciate your odor control.
yes, that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone have any other questions? Okay. I think that's any future items?
I have one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to request a future item on runway accidents in the downtown area and what streets and transportation and other departments have done or are doing to minimize these incidents. I know that we had a major incident a few weeks ago, and I would like for us to start taking a closer look on that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I thought I was anticipating the street racing, drag racing item to be on today's agenda. So I would like that on the next agenda. Drag racing and street racing is at a peak right now, and our public safety is trying to do everything that they can, but communities are now reaching out not only to our offices, but now are reaching out to media to talk about safety.
Just as a follow-up, I saw, I can't remember which channel it was on, but there's a new phenomenon where they spin in the middle of an intersection, almost as a, like come see me, and I don't know, that might be a part of the
Yes,
drag
this
racing?
is all the-
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called.
I can't remember what it's called either.
Does that
They
show
have
age?
hookups, I think, or
Yeah, it shows
something.
age.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we'll make sure that item is on the next agenda.
With a video?
With video?
Yeah, so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. Hearing none, we are adjourned.